Ryan here, and in today's video I will be talking about making a dichotomous key for your upcoming unknown project. So a quick overview of what to expect in this video. I will first be talking about what a dichotomous key is, for those of you who may be coming across this for the first time, what it's used for, and finally at the end, just demonstrating how to make your own dichotomous key using PowerPoint. So what is a dichotomous key? So according to the definition, a dichotomous key is a key, table, or flowchart created to identify or classify an object, which will be microbes in our case, into specific categories based on their characteristics and or traits. So it's a little bit hard to visualize, but I like to compare the dichotomous key to using WebMD. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with going on WebMD, typing in your symptoms, and WebMD sort of just spitting out a bunch of potential ailments that you might have. And as you kind of go into each one and gather more information, you realize that some of these don't really apply to you. And you're able to narrow down all those different ailments that you were initially offered down to a few of them, or maybe just one, that matches your symptoms more specifically. And I feel it's that process of narrowing down a bunch of different ailments and getting to one specific ailment that matches you that resembles the function of the dichotomous key very well. And so I hope you found that analogy helpful in kind of getting a better idea of what a dichotomous key is. So another thing to mention is the word itself, dichotomous, which means divided into two parts. I really want to emphasize that part right there, divided into two, because at each step you have to maintain that distinction between two choices. If you are deciding between three things, your dichotomous key won't function as well, and it just ends up getting very complicated, and and you sort of lose that streamlined functionality of your dichotomous key. The last thing I want to talk about is dichotomous keys can come in a lot of different forms. They can be done visually or in a written format. But for today's purposes, I will be showing you how to make one visually, as I feel that's the best suited in our situation. So what is it used for? First, it can be used to it can be used to identify or categorize certain organisms, or more importantly, to organize large amounts of information into a clear and logical format. So as you guys will be performing your unknown, or as you guys will be kind of going into your unknown project, you'll be accumulating a lot of different tests, test results, and your own interpretation of those tests. And that amounts to a lot of information being amassed. So a dichotomous key is great for organizing your step-by-step process that allowed you to go from point A, which is when you received your unknown organism, to your final destination at point B, where after a series of testing you are then able to identify your organism. And from that, when you do make your dichotomous key, you'll be able to see your entire process from a big picture perspective. Alright. So before I go into actually making a dichotomous key, I felt it'd be important to sort of set up a context, as I feel that will help you in the process of making one. So in this slide here, I have 4 groups of bacteria, which I've just simply labeled as A, B, C, and D. In the original scenario, of course, before school shut down, what would have happened is you would have came into lab, and you would have received a test tube containing your unknown organism. Now, of course, in your unknown project, you're going to have a lot more than just 4 groups. In fact, you'd probably have a bunch of genuses that you'll start out with and then kind of have to narrow down. But just to keep this example short and simple, this organism here in your test tube will either be A, B, C, or D. And now at this stage, you'll have to refer to the Berge's manual. So if you haven't taken a look at this book yet, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work out. I'm sure your teachers have a copy online that they will show you. But prior to school closing down, we did suggest you guys to kind of take a look at it and get comfortable with it, because it is a very extensive manual that contains a bunch of information on all the genuses and species of bacteria that you will be dealing with, and of course how they respond to certain tests. And they have these beautifully designed tables that you can look at that show you all the results. And from that you have to kind of reduce and find out what your bacteria is. So going back to our example here, you take a look at Berge's and you find out that bacteria in groups A, C, and D are gram-negative bacteria, and bacteria in group B are gram-positive. And so after performing your gram stain, you get this result. And you see here that based on the morphology, it's sort of this cockeye shape and has this deep purple hue, which you know is indicative of a bacteria that has a gram-positive cell type. So how lucky for us that based on our gram stain being gram-positive, we know that our unknown organism cannot be in group A, C, or D. And so that just narrows us down to group B. Alright, so unfortunately you are not done at this step. Group B, you know, is a very general term. And within group B there can be multiple species. And so at this step we need to get down to the level of speciation. So I'm just going to use the Staphylococcus genus as our example here. And we know that in Staphylococcus there are a lot of different species. So this unknown bacteria here could potentially be Epidermidis, aureus, or Saprophyticus. And of course there's a bunch more, but we're just going to focus on these three to keep things simple. So at this step, you once again refer back to Berge's and you look for a test that helps separate these three species from each other, and you decide that the coagulase test is the best test to use here, as you know that after performing the test, you can narrow it down to either aureus if the test results come out positive, or between Epidermidis or Saprophyticus if it comes out negative. Now, of course, if the test did come out negative, you would then have to perform more tests to separate between Epidermidis and Saprophyticus. But once again, lucky for you, after performing the coagulase test, you notice these specific signs of agglutination or clumping, which you know is indicative of a positive result. So finally, after doing those two tests, you are then able to narrow it down to the species of Staphylococcus aureus. And so congratulations. Unfortunately, when you perform your tests and go about your own unknown projects, it's not going to be that simple. It will take more than two tests to identify your bacteria. But hopefully, through this example, it kind of gave you an idea of how to go about your unknown project and kind of what mindset you should have when approaching this project. Alright, so with that example set out, let's go about making our dichotomous key. Alright, so as I open up a new PowerPoint here, we're just going to get rid of these text box here. The program that I'm using is the latest Microsoft Office PowerPoint presentation. For those of you who have this program, that's perfect. You can just easily translate what I'm doing here when you work on your own dichotomous key. For those of you who may be using other programs or perhaps Google Slides, I will try to make a demonstration video for those for another time. For now, we'll just be using this because this is the program that I used when I was making my dichotomous key. Alright, so the first thing we need to do here is alter the orientation. And in order to do that, you just have to click on the Design tab here. Oops, let's bring that back. And click on Slide Size and go to Page Setup. Now in this section here, all we have to do is in this slide section, just click this button and that will shift the presentation into a portrait or vertical format. Now the next thing I like to do is just kind of alter the height a little bit to make it longer so that it gives you more room to work with, as you'll have a lot of different tests that you'll have to fit into your dichotomous key. Now I chose 18 inches, but this is kind of arbitrary. You can choose something shorter or longer depending on what works for you. But this is what I set it to. Alright. And finally, it will ask you either to scale the content up or down. You just select scale up, and voila, it switches the orientation for you. Now, before I go any further, I just wanted to go back. So, as I mentioned earlier, the dichotomous key helps you to organize your process. And so I hope by using that example and kind of showing you how to make a dichotomous key through PowerPoint, you can sort of see visually what's going on as I organize the different tests that I use to get down to the species. So first, I don't really like a background that's too bright, and so if you want to change the background color, you just kind of have to go back to Design here and go to Format Background. And this bucket here, labeled color, just select that and kind of pick a color of your own choice, but I like a more darker background as it is just easier on the eyes. Alright, so with that set up, let's begin. So the first thing, of course, is we got to set up a title. And so I like to use the shape function here to kind of start creating some of our designs. So the shape that I used is this one here, which is the frame shape. And it creates this nice rectangular border. And at this step, we can start altering the color of the frame and the density of the border itself, or the thickness, not density. And so in shape fill, you can change the color, and in shape outline, you can then sort of change the line weight, to which I'll just set it to around 3 points. All right. And in PowerPoint, if you just double click here, it sort of automatically creates a text box. And in here, we'll just put in the title, Dichotomous Key. Now the black font is a little bit hard to see with this dark background, so let's just kind of change the font color to something lighter. Alright, there we go. So now that we have our title created, you can now begin working on setting up the process that we went through in our example unknown project. So let's once again just kind of adjust everything here, set it up to 3 points. And now in this first box, you'll be putting, for you, all the families of bacteria that you start with, or the genuses. And so for us, we had, in our example, groups A, B, C, and D. And that's what we started out with. All right? So let's just make the font bigger so it's more visible, and change the font color again. You know what? This box does not need to be that big, so let's just adjust it and center that. All right, cool. So now let's go back to the shape function again and select this one that creates a line. So what we'll do is just sort of generate a short line here. Once again, it's a little too thin, so we gotta make it thicker so it's more visible, and make the color similar to that of the original box here. Now instead of kind of going back to the shape function, which is a little bit clunky, once you sort of have these initial shapes set up, you can just kind of select them and copy them. And so I'm just going to copy this line and make another one and change its position so it's horizontal and kind of extend it a little bit. Okay. Create another one right here. Another one right there. And once again, after we do that, we then can select another frame here. Actually, I am so sorry. We don't need this. What we need is the next test that we performed. So the first test that we did was obviously the gram stain. We'll center that once again, change the color, and just increase the font size a little bit so it's bigger so that you guys can see. Obviously mine is a little bit sloppy. You do not want to be taking up this much space already, because if you take a look here, sorry about that. I am already halfway down my whole page. So you want to be conscientious of how much space you're taking with your designs, because if you're not careful, you're gonna run out of space. Of course, you can just go back to your page setup and just make it longer. But when it comes to printing it out, you might run into some troubles, unless you have access to a printer that can print really long sheets of paper. But since, we only did 2 tests here, and I'm just trying to demonstrate how to approach making a dichotomous key, we should be fine for now. But when you guys do it, please do keep that in mind. Alright, so when we did the gram stain, we know that the gram stain ends up with 2 potential results, which is either the organism is gram negative or gram positive. So this is where we want to kind of create that little fork, because it leads to 2 potential results. And so I just kind of selected this line here and have just been making copies of it and just pasting it and just putting it together like a puzzle piece. And now we have these 2 potential directions this flowchart can go in. So let's select that frame again, create another copy of it. This guy's a little too big, so let's just kind of shorten it a bit so that we have space in the middle and nothing overlaps. Copy that again and just put it right here. Cool. Once again, This side we'll type in as gram-positive, and over here we'll write gram-negative. Okay. Change the font color. Great. All right, so now here, draw 2 more lines there. So we know that for the gram-negative results, had it been gram-negative, it would have led to groups A, B, C, and, or sorry, not A, B, A, C, and D. But in our case, it ended up being gram-positive, so that led us to just group B. Okay, just center that, highlight it, and you know what, let's just make it a little bit bigger so people can see what it is. Alright, so what I like to do to kind of show the result that I got, I like to highlight the result. Actually, that's not a very good color. You can change the font color here to something else so it sticks out more. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, to highlight the result that you ended up getting, so that as a person who's looking at this dichotomous key, we'll know which direction to follow. So we ended up getting gram-positive, and that just isolated us to group B. And now, for our final test, we decided to do the coagulase test. Make it a little bit bigger. Cool. Alright, and once again, we do the same thing here. Copy this line and create another fork, just like that. I'm really sorry for those folks who have OCD. I know some of these aren't lining up exactly the way they should be. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Alright, so we know, once again, the results can either be positive or negative. So we know that group B was representing the genus Staphylococcus. And so after the coagulase test, this is when we start getting into the species level. So if the test ended up being negative, we would have known that the species would have been Staph epidermidis and or Staph saprophyticus. And the autocorrect here is capitalizing that, which you should not be. Okay. And once again, let's just change the color of the font so it's more visible. And had the test come out negative or positive, we would have known that the organism was Staph aureus. And luckily for us, the test came out positive for us, so we're just going to highlight that. And so we ended up with Staph aureus. So as you can see, the dichotomous key just basically resembles a flowchart, and for some of you who may have already made one before in one of your earlier biology classes, it kind of resembles the animal kingdom, where it just sort of looks like a family tree. And so the dichotomous key, once again, just sort of shows you all the different steps that you took and the path that you followed that led you to identifying your unknown organism. Alright, so I hope you guys found this video helpful. I do want to mention that you do not have to use this method only to make your dichotomous key. I just kind of like to do it this way because some of the templates that I found just didn't really, in my opinion, they just seemed a little clunky. But for you, you can honestly just go online. There's plenty of templates for dichotomous keys that you can find, and you can just input your results and your tests that you've done into that. That works as well. But this is just to kind of show you not just how to make a dichotomous key, but the whole process and mentality that goes behind it, so that you can sort of better understand what its use is for. Alright, so if you guys have any more questions, to my students out there, once again, you know me through D2L, or you can contact me through my personal Gmail. And if you guys have any suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment. I'm trying to always make my videos better so that they help you guys out and that they're easy to understand. So thank you. Please stay safe and have a good rest of your day, guys. Bye.